You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we're here to discuss all the latest news related to content coming to streaming services in the future and some news that's currently happening as we speak. So there is a little bit of news for almost every single service this time around, but not a whole lot of in-depth discussion related to a lot of these. So some of this is going to come off as, well, we're just reading through the news because that's what it is. But we do have comments for some of them, and we'll get to those when we get to them. So let's start off with Netflix. First up, there was a college cheerleading docuseries ordered from the creator behind Last Chance U. That was a football series that was previously on Netflix. So there's that. Netflix announced that they're going to be adapting Paul McCartney's High in the Clouds, which is a book, a children's book that he wrote, into an animated film. Netflix is planning to tell the story of Spotify in a new scripted series, and then a new animated series featuring messaging app characters from Japan has been ordered at Netflix as well. So out of these, the only thing that I thought was kind of interesting and looked like something I would pay attention to is the Spotify series, specifically because it sounds like, at least from the description, that it could be the social network which was to Facebook, as this could be for Spotify. So it could tell the story of how Spotify came to be, but in a dramatic sense, similar to the vein that the social network was made. And I'm all for dramatic series or films that tell about the history of companies, because that's really interesting to me, but it also makes it more interesting than just a normal documentary, which I still watch all the time, but it just makes it that much more enjoyable, especially in this sense, it'll be an actual series, not just a film.
That's definitely the most interesting content piece of Netflix that I'm interested in. I wouldn't have been that interested unless it was like a few months ago. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about Spotify and kind of how like the founder had this this is like his third or fourth company, and he's been like iterating, this process, and then he like all of a sudden gets into like music streaming, and like it details kind of like this quote unquote rivalry with like Apple iTunes and whatnot, and that was pretty cool. Spotify, I don't know if you know this, Dustin, but they're a little bit different because they were in the news because they won't move out of Sweden. And there's been pressure to like move to somewhere cheaper because housing prices in Sweden are pretty high. And it's kind of cool to see how he's really invested in that community. And it's like, you know what, we're a Swedish company. We're going to invest back into our country. And so that was pretty cool. So that's why I'm interested in this Spotify story.
Yeah, that seems to be a trend with a lot of Nordic companies that they don't want to leave their roots behind, not related to specifically streaming services, but Lego's another company that refuses to leave Denmark. Then you've got IKEA as well. There's companies that are very, very big that it could be cheaper to be basically anywhere else than where they're currently at.
And it's pretty cool how they've like lobbied for the government to, because a lot of the places there's like rent control, and there's probably other people who could talk about this better, but evidently like rent control is a thing and prices are high and whatnot. And so it's kind of cool how it's not like, we're going to stay here, invest in like the community. It's like they lobby for, their community and dealing with like housing and more development projects and stuff like that. That was pretty cool how they not only like invest, like economically, they invest their time in like political capital.
All right. So then moving over to Prime Video, the rundown of the news behind that service is they have announced their first scripted Australian original series. This is going to be called Back to the Rafters. There's a lot of drama series that actually come out of Australia that actually end up getting adapted in other countries, including here in the U.S. But the first Australian one is going to be coming from Amazon in the near future. Amazon has continued to push for soccer with the UEFA Champions League in Germany. Now, this is something we've talked about at length
Another
a lot.
Sports thing.
That's exactly. We've talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks with sports and the streaming services, and it does not seem like in any way, shape, or form this is going to be slowing down. Netflix saw basically you get the start of them having the Premier League in Europe on Prime Video, and then literally days later, we find out that they're also moving into soccer from Germany as well with the Champions League. Again, this sports stuff isn't going anywhere, and Amazon seems to be the one that's primed to really get into the market as much as they possibly can. I also read something, this comes back to some stuff we've talked about on the streaming services episode earlier in the week. I've heard some stuff about how Amazon had the number of people who have been watching the Premier League on Amazon is actually well outpacing the amount of people that typically watch on broadcast, which is a huge number, which also could do very, very good things for Amazon's future with potentially having more rights to the NFL and things like that. All right, so then there's also a new unscripted series featuring Nick Jonas and Priyanka Chopra. Those two are married, and it's going to be following their lives since they just celebrated their first anniversary. And then James May, known from Top Gear and currently the Grand Tour, he has a special coming up on Amazon, but he's looking to pitch additional shows, including potentially bringing back one of his old shows from BBC called Man Labs. So this was he's just looking at a variety. He also has a lot of other travel shows that he'd like to do as a single creator rather than with the other two that he's best known for. So that's Prime Video. Moving over to Apple TV Plus, there was an announcement that Billie Eilish has landed a documentary for the service. The most interesting thing about this announcement was actually that she's getting paid $25 million to be part of this documentary, or to have her life documented for this. And personally, I thought that was an insane amount of money, because while that's not upwards of like $50 million like some of the top tier Marvel actors have been paid, that is still a lot of money for a documentary. And it's unknown if it's a film or a TV series at this time, but even if it was a TV series with 8 episodes being an hour apiece, yes, they'd have to get a lot of footage in order to make an 8-hour long series. $25 million just feels like they're just throwing money, honestly.
Yeah, I know she's really popular, and she, I think, stole a lot of awards at the most recent music awards. And so she's, kind of in the past few years, one of the biggest name artists. And so I get the draw of having her on your service to, get viewers and whatnot, but $25 million, I mean, wow, that's, I think that's very expensive. And I think that they're overpaying for this content. And this is, in my opinion, this is a bad business move just due to the cost of it. She's going to get viewers and people are going to sign up to watch her, but I think that they overbidded for this content. And if they keep doing this, I can see, Apple TV being in some trouble.
I definitely agree. And it just, we've heard about companies throwing around money for content, but this is a whole nother level. This is just one project we're talking. And one of the projects most recently that people have talked about that was an insane amount of money was The Mandalorian. And supposedly it was $15 million to film each episode. I'm not exactly sure that number was correct. That might have been blown out of proportion, but it's because not that it doesn't warrant that amount of money, but like when you watch the show, it's a very well done show, and it does look like it could be in the same vein as some of the films and things like that. There's no question about that.
Well, people are talking about The Mandalorian. They don't talk about people's documentaries.
Right, exactly. And that's the difference. Just keep in mind that if she's getting paid $25 million, that's not even including the cost of actually making it, which could be a couple $1 million on top of that. So you're talking $30 million potentially for this documentary that may potentially bring in subscribers, but who's to say that they're not going to just check out the thing as part of a 7-day trial or something like that. So all right, so then moving over to Disney Plus, the new Home Alone film has moved forward, and this is going to be specifically on Disney Plus. The announcement actually was more about the cast attached to it. We don't talk about cast announcements in general, but the last time we heard anything about this project was back in August when Bob Iger mentioned it as one of the Fox projects that they were looking at readapting, including the other ones that they talked about were Night at the Museum, Cheaper by the Dozen, then there was Home Alone, and then I believe there was one other one, but I can't remember what it was. But they were all family-friendly franchises that could easily be rebooted in some way. Now, it does look like at least this. So I don't know your familiarity or your attachment per se to Home Alone, but I personally think that Home Alone is a great holiday film, and it's one of those things where there are certain things that don't really need to be redone. And honestly, a lot of people probably don't even know this, but they had Home Alone 1 and 2. There was a third one that tried to say it was the same family, even though it was completely different cast. Then there was actually a fourth and a fifth one made as a made-for-TV original movie, and none of those did very well, and they were all very poorly put together and done. And I only know this because my son insisted on watching all of them. And I enjoy the first two for what they are, as something that I watched as a child, but I feel like if Disney's intent is just to remake a lot of the Fox movies by putting on Disney Plus, I'm questioning whether or not it could actually be successful, or it could just end up being somehow just like some of those other made-for-TV original films, which don't end up very well. That's not to say that is going to be for sure the case. Disney has done well. The catch, of course, is that so far we've only gotten 2 movies ever released: Lady and the Tramp, which was well received, and then Noelle, which was not very well received. And when you look at those movies, it's very, very different films, and the quality behind each of those films is very, very different. And I guess if they go the route of Lady and the Tramp, and it could end up being very good and just being like a new version. Honestly, I can't think of a whole lot of properties out there that have been brought back that have done extremely well. Now, obviously, there's the Star Wars franchise is probably one that did better, at least than the last group of movies, but there's not a whole lot of franchises that get brought back that do extremely well.
The thing with Star Wars is that it continued the story. Like, it picked
exactly.
up.
It wasn't just redoing it.
Yeah, they weren't redoing it, and that's how come it was successful, because they just didn't repeat the same thing because it's a classic. I've seen Home Alone. I've seen 1, potentially 2 when it's been on TV. I really don't care for them. Like, I don't think they're bad. Just they were a good holiday movie to watch. I think Disney's playing it safe. I mean, they made The Mandalorian, and that's like their big splashy thing. But it just seems, kind of, hey, we have all these properties, and let's just reboot them, and let's just play it safe right now, and just rest on like nostalgia. And that's not, I think, a necessarily good business model, because like I'm not going to pay for Disney Plus to get Home Alone again. Like, I've seen that once. It was decent. Like, I don't want to see it again, and they're just playing it safe. And I think that if they keep doing this, they're going to lose some people, because people want something new, like I like The Office, but I don't want to watch like I don't want to see that redone, like it was a classic. Let's move forward. Let's have some new ideas. If they keep this process of nostalgia, then I'm really worried for the service in the future.
I agree. I think my biggest problem with the idea is that if it doesn't continue the story, it'd be completely different if they decided we're going to bring back Macaulay Culkin and he's going to be the dad this time around, or something that continues the story in some way. That would be okay, and I would be okay with something like that. But just the idea of rebooting stuff just for the sake of rebooting, I mean, the thing is, like, that was my biggest concern with the entire premise of the 21st Century Fox library, is that Disney is only going to pick and choose certain things to continue on, and a lot of the stuff that maybe would have been successful at 20th Century Fox isn't going to be successful at Disney, because Disney's not even going to give it a chance. They have other franchises out there like Alien, Predator, Die Hard. Those franchises will probably never see the light of day while they're underneath Disney. And I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it, because that doesn't fit within, the idea. Now, that's not to say that you won't see rated R films or more adult-oriented films, because what will probably happen is they'll just continue to use Fox as kind of the award brand, the brand that creates a lot of award films and things like that, where they could just be original stuff, but they're not going to continue on some of these other franchises that exist that have had their fair share of popularity, just because that's that. But the ones that they are going to play with, the only 2 that as of right now that have gotten any word about the franchises that they're going to keep around are PG-13 or under. The 2 of them is Planet of the Apes and Avatar. Those are the only 2 at Fox, that the major franchises that they are continuing to do that will continue to move forward in theatrical sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's because they, 1, made money, and 2, they were very well received by critics.
Yes. All right, so moving over to HBO Max, there's only 2 announcements. The first one is a Lena Dunham-produced dramedy called Generation has gotten a series order. And then there is a clinical depression comedy in the works at HBO Max. It hasn't been picked up, but it is being put together at this point in time.
Out of all these shows, I think clinical depression is one that caught my eye. And, speaking as someone who has struggled with mental illness and, depression, I'm kind of curious this take because, one, obviously we don't want to like stigmatize people, but I don't know. I find it comforting, like talking to people who, have mental illness and, like just like sharing experiences and whatnot. And I could see like a comedy version of this, like really working. Cause with some people it's like, oh, like, hey, that's hilarious because I like do the same thing or whatnot. And, if they do it right, I think this is going to be a good show. It's definitely new and I like new things. Just to have one question though. What is, and when you look through the press report, it talks about it being a single camera setup. What does that mean?
So multi-camera means you'll see multiple directions of point of view while something's filming. That's typical for most dramas, most sitcoms and things like that, where they go back and forth between, they'll show one side of someone talking and then you'll see the back of them while they're facing the person and they'll go back and forth. That's a multi-camera. Single camera just means it's just a single camera that focuses on whatever they need to focus on. You're going to see a lot less close-ups in situations like that because the camera just it needs to focus on everything in the room at the same time. So yes, think Office, exactly that is what single camera is.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think this is going to be a hit show for HBO Max if they do it right.
All right, so then jumping over to other services, there's a couple of different things. Let's start off with Quibi. First up, we've got Reno 911, which was previously on Comedy Central, is getting a revival, meaning it's not rebooting it, it is actually continuing it, and this will be season 7 of the series. That is coming to Quibi. Then we've got Rachel Hollis, who is a motivational speaker. She's going to be hosting a motivational talk show at Quibi. Quibi has announced 3 more programs as part of their Daily Essentials lineup. One is dealing with sex, dating, and relationships. One is a fashion review show, and one is a black culture series. These are all planning on launching on the same day that the series actually launches, on April 6th. In addition to that, we also have Rosie Huntington-Whiteley will be hosting a fashion-focused show. Then we also have a show called Black Coffee, which will be a comedy series. That's in the works at Quibi. And then there's a new gaming thriller announced at Quibi. This is coming from executive producer Ridley Scott. And then we have Quibi has picked up a Code 8 spinoff series. And you actually sent me that story before I saw it. You must have heard about what Code 8 is because I was unaware. I recognized the people involved in the project, but I was unaware of what the project was and had to kind of do a little bit of search to figure out what it was. So what is Code 8?
So Code 8 is a movie. Stephen Amell, he's on different projects, but he most known for being, the Green Arrow in the CW's Arrow show, and his cousin Robbie Amell was on The Flash for a bit. They do projects together, but Code 8 was like their pet project that they've been working on for a couple years, and they finally were able to finance it and make it a movie. And from the previews that I saw, it looks pretty cool. And so this is interesting because they're trying to make a spin-off series. I'm not sure how that's going to work because a lot of this like Quibi content is going to be like short form, and it's like, how do you do like a suspenseful show in like 10 minutes? Like you break it up in like 10 minutes and there's all these different plots and stuff like that. So that's, out of all like the Quibi shows that I've like heard, this is the one that's going to be the most challenging, I think, to film and to write for. Yeah, it's just an interesting concept of like why Quibi would like pick this up. It's just, I don't know. I'm very curious of the future of this.
As am I. I mean, I was interested in, once I read about what the series was based off of and it was a movie and all of that, I was really interested in learning more about the movie itself. So we'll see what happens. And then the only other service that had some news is that Peacock announced that they are working on a K-pop musical drama, and this is called Olympic Boulevard. I don't have a whole lot of other news outside of that, but it is currently in the works, not necessarily for sure going to happen, but that is in the works at Peacock as well. So then, moving into some trailers that have been released, there is a film called Troop Zero on Prime Video, which is coming on January 17th. We have Ronnie Ching, Asian Comedian Destroys America, coming on Netflix on December 17th. Vice Investigates K-Pop on Hulu. This is already released on December 6th. The Boys Season 2 on Prime Video is coming sometime in in 2020. The App on Netflix is coming on December 26th. Six Underground, this was another trailer for that film. This is coming on Netflix on December 13th. The Circle on Netflix is coming on January 1st. Hillary on Hulu comes March 6th. Spinning Out is coming to Netflix on January 1st. Alana Glazer, The Planet is Burning on Prime Video comes on January 3rd. Star Trek Short Treks, The Girl Who Made the Stars on CBS All Access is out now on December 12th. And then Star Trek Short Treks Ephraim and Dot is also on CBS All Access on December 12th. And then we have The Witcher on Netflix released their final trailer, which is coming on December 20th. So out of all these trailers, I'll be honest, not a whole lot of these looked super interesting. The Boys is something I will be watching because I watched the first season, but I don't have any idea of when it's coming. And to be honest, the trailer was kind of just a real quick montage of a bunch of action sequences and things like that, not really revealing a whole lot of what's happening in the second season. So if you wanted to check out any of these trailers, we do have links to all these trailers in the show notes. If you are interested in some of the other content that is coming out in the very near future, be sure to head over to our site, thestreamingwars.io/streaming, to actually see a release calendar with all of the content that is coming soon. Out of the content that is actually coming within the next week, there's only really one new project that's coming out that I really want to take a look at in the next week, which is the Michael Bay film Six Underground starring Ryan Reynolds. This is coming out, actually, as you're listening to this, it's out today, December 13th. I gotta say, I'm a sucker for these crazy action movies and over-the-top stunts and things like that, and I feel like Michael Bay could have a really long future at Netflix because his budgets are, not hindered by necessarily the box office, so he can make films that are very successful. He can do his product placement all over the place like he's known for, and it can tell just a fun story. Looking by all the trailers that have released, it looks like it's going to be an enjoyable film. I showed it to my wife and she watched it and she said she'd check it out too. So that's probably the only project within the next week that we're actually going to be taking a look at that's newer. I do have a ton of stuff in my backlog of things that I still want to see. I'm probably going to finish the Toys That Made Us and probably at least start the movies that made us in the coming week. But outside of that, I've just been getting work done in preparation for the holidays. So anything you're looking forward to?
I'm excited about The Boys season 2, but I haven't seen season 1 and it's on my to-do list. I need to get it and I'm going to watch that. But yeah, I love, superhero things. I like dark superhero things, I guess. I'm just very real world and gritty just because I can relate to it and it's kind of, real life. It makes more sense. So The Boys season 2 is pretty much the only thing I'm really interested in. I've been on a kick of rewatching Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay, and I finished that series, and I'm starting back How I Met Your Mother. So just going back to the classics and to the roots and whatnot. But yeah, but besides those two things, I've either been working or I went to go see Knives Out twice, and I think that's a fantastic film that everyone should watch. Realistically, what I'm most interested in and I'm excited for coming up is the new Star Wars movie. But that's not anything related to streaming. But I just want to go watch Star Wars because it's amazing.
All right, so with all of that being said, this was a rather short episode, but honestly, this is the time of the year where we don't have a ton of news, and even the news that is coming out is kind of under the radar, specifically just because the holidays is a time where there's a lot of stuff going on in people's personal lives where they're not keeping track of the news. So we're going to just end this on a short note and say we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to head over to the site to check out the release calendar. You can follow us on Twitter and Discord for all the latest articles that we talk about here on the podcast, and even some articles that we don't talk about that we just find very interesting. You can follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes releasing. And then in addition to that, you can leave us reviews on any of the podcast platforms that you're listening to. You can listen to this podcast on any of those podcast platforms that are available, as well as Pandora, which was recently added. And we also have the show over on YouTube as well, so definitely check that out. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. We will get back in touch with you or discuss your comments on a future episode, depending on what the comments are. With all of that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.